Good morning, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal and Adab. This is my 287th video, and this is in continuation to my earlier video 286, where I am defining what actually would the word old grant be defined as. So, what really happened after that judgment of 1765? What really went? So, how do we understand the word old? And then the same was called grant. So, with the full name would be called old grant. Why were we not called just grant alone? If we were a British grant after 12th August 1765, we should have been called a new grant. So, we are called old grant. So, how all this begins and why am I using these words as old grant and new grants needs to be understood. So, after this judgment given that the sovereignty was transferred in the Treaty of 1st February 1757 to 1st February 1765 to the British, if by conquest it is meant a transference of sovereign rights as a consequence of the supersession of one military power by another. It is not overstraining language to speak of English rule in Bengal as being established by virtue of a conquest. Now, the question may be asked to our courts that what the court opened in the 1765 judgment, as it was drawn on the basis of fraud and breach of contract. That is the treaty. So, where is this Farman? We can again check onto it. The other question, can sovereignty be transferred by conquest? We need to question. In strict etymology, the term Zamindar means a land, a zamin, that's called holder, dar. In revenue practice, a zamindar is one who holds a portion of land described as pragna or an adequate portion thereof. So, from 1775 to the date of the permanent settlements in 1793, the question was discussed with much learning and some whims. Now, what were these questions? Is the sovereign or are the zamindars the owners of the land in India? So, this was being discussed during the British also. So, this question, who is the landlord, was never on the minds of the British Council. They were more interested in changing the Mughal system of land revenue, and Lord Hastings clearly stated in 1785-86 parliamentary debate, he is more interested in revenue collection. And why was this? As 25 lakh of payment was his main magnitude of concerns to the Nawab. This was in the original treaty of 1757. So now the entire shift was from that judgment to Zamindari and to the Mughal land revenue system. Now, how does Baden-Powell points out this word Zamindari? He says a Zamindar is one, the right to the revenue share. Second, the right to dispose of waste and unoccupied lands. The right to certain minerals, royalties, etc. So the Zamindar culminated with these three rights. The Zamindar, when they come into prominence, not as petty, half-tamed kings or chieftains, but as Zamindars, are local capitalists employed by the state to exercise these zamindari rights on specified conditions. Further, Baden-Powell goes on to state that the payment required of the Roth was therefore of a twofold kind. One, the Nirak, the Asal Jama, and was a fixed rate per biga. The Awabs or cess, the Khasnovasi, Mathut or Post Bandi, etc., or called Rasam Nazarut, or the expenses of elephants, Filkhana, Faujdari Awabs, Kharej Jama. One of the most formidable demand made on the Roths by the Zamindar was Mangan. This structure was defined in 5 ways. Of the Mughal system, indeed had become so thoroughly rotten that when in 1772 the English government attempted to relieve the cultivator by abolishing some of the most obvious abuses, Lord Hastings came forward with some 17 proposals for the collection of revenues and gave land rights and allowed heritable rights, but at the same time, if revenue was not paid, resumption of lands and then to be sold to another zamindar and so on. But these settlements were for 5 years to be renewed, and leases were made with these revenue paying zamindars. Now the word lease comes here. So British government gave the making of Pitt's Act in 1784. This gave the British Council powers to make regulations for the better governance of the British India. Now, this is very important because in a lot of cases I've heard that the government leaders are generally saying that after 1784, the Pitt's Act gave them powers to make rules and laws. So, this is how that all started. These rules and regulations were mainly to be made for the revenue. So, this is where the regulation started. So, the first regulation started in 1784. The British started showing their supremacy, and Lord Marcus Carnival was asked to be the Governor General in 1786. After this, sweeping powers were made in settlements and were asked to be done directly with farmers and not relations or agents over these farmers. These settlements will continue for 10 years with a view of perpetuity and no increase in Juma. So, what is in perpetuity? Is that settlement or is that Juma? So, this new system gave the farmers 2/5 of the gross produce, and government got the remainder in which it had to pay the zamindar approximately 1/10 of the share or maximum 3/15 of the share in whole and village officers. So in return, the money to the zamindar was coming from the British government. The remainder portion of the revenue was shared between the Mukdim or the head cultivator of the village. This system was being crafted and implemented. So by 1790-91, government for the province of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa made some 2 crores 68 lakhs rupees, and from the province of Banaras, a sikka rupees of approximately 34 lakhs 53,000. With this, the government was willing to recognize the proprietary rights in the land of the Zamindar. So, friends, here the question rises, like during the period when this judgment came and the Zamindaris were being allotted, what really the British government was trying to transform? They were only trying to transform a revenue system other than the Mughal revenue system. So the revenue system, they said, let's go straight to the tillers. So here that divide and rule policy was coming in, although they were garnering that kind of a policy. They said, let's go to the tiller, give him the right to give us the Lagan straight. So what does he retain? He retains 2/5 of the gross produce. This is how this entire settlement in Baden-Powell is very clearly said what zamindars were given rights. But subsequently, it was the last tiller, the Roth, who was also being given perpetual rights for 5 years, 10 years, and that. So, friends, once again, I'm saying we guys were never new grants. Now you understand that is why it is written that because we were old grants prior to the cut date of August 1757 or maybe 65 to be more precise, and for that reason, the Britishers made sure that how these lands or these grants have to be called old grants or new grants. Thank you. Good day.